Let's see how this Soviet lander is coming along. Still working on the foil and focusing. I'm going to do the top stage first. And as you can see, there's the bare resin. And this is actually doesn't need much foil, but some of it will. And I've got almost half of this side covered. I just painted foil with some spray can primer, and putting it on, you take some of the paint's coming off, so I have to touch it up with some hand painting. I still got to do the top and this back dome, but I think it's going to look interesting, if nothing else. It's certainly different, and I think it does need foil, blanket, and not just bare metal. So anyway, that's my artistic license take on this thing coming along. So now I'm putting some foil on this little section separately, and that way we can glue it on. And it's got some supports on it and stuff, and just doing this by itself is a lot easier. And it's a matter of cutting out little bits of foil, painting one side. I got glue on here, and then apply it to the surface here. And here we got all these little spheres and stuff, so I'll cut little slots in here and just sort of tack it down a little at a time, so we get relatively not smooth, but it can't wrap a flat surface around a round object. So we cut little pie pieces in it, and eventually that works out. The accent stage got paint touched up, and actually I touched up some more. I guess touch up the silver paint. I touched up all the white, and I installed this piece here, which I had to do the blankets first, and that's done. So this is coming along. I touch up the black. The next thing is attach this thruster package on top, and that's been foiled and painted, and it's going to go on something like this. And there's little tripods, actually bipods, that hold that up, and they give you photo etch for that. But I'm going to use just some styrene sticks. It's round like the real thing, and it'll be painted white because there's white on the real thing, although at least in the mock-up, so that'll work out. And I actually added little pads under here, little pads on here for that to attach to. And then meanwhile, the docking, I don't know what you want to call it, grid, has been painted. Just I'm going to keep it bare metal. I painted the inner section with some gunmetal, hoping it would be darker, but it didn't come out that way. These slots here kind of fit in here pretty well, and then I'll get glued together once that's dried a little more thoroughly, and then that top will be done. And there's a few more little parts. Well, then actually, I think before I glue this on, the little thrusters that go on here, they've been painted and they're ready to go. But I want to glue them on and kind of dry fit everything first. There's a bunch of tiny little photo-etched antennas, and I'm starting to build those. As you can see, they're terribly tiny with a tiny little tripod. This is, yeah, it's that tiny. It's very small. It's a fun with photo etch. And this results in a bunch of little tiny antenna things. Then I gotta paint and then glue on. Made a little progress here. I've installed the this little brace here on the bottom because all the blankets had to be done first because there's blankets behind it. And I just glued on the top section, this attitude control. And they give you photo etch parts for these little support struts, but I went and used some styrene rod. I think it'll look a little more three-dimensional. And I'll put a little paint on it once that glue sets up. So slowly making progress here. Touched up the black paint and I'm gonna put the little thrusters on next. I started working on photo-etch parts, and I'm gonna put them on later in the process because they're so fragile. Now I'm starting on the landing stage, the descent stage. I already had these pieces put together, and there's little supports for the legs. They glue on here. They needed a little cleanup. They all need a little cleanup. And then the legs have 4 main struts, and each has 2, one on the side. And boy, what a lot of cleanup there has to be. There's a little fork on each end. Let's see that. There's a little fork down there, and there's one that's supposed to be on top. This one, the best I could do, clean it up, because you're starting with something like this, just sort of a glob of resin. And there's hints of a fork there, and you just have to scrape everything away that doesn't look like a fork. And there's 8 of these, so it's going to be a lot of fun. Here's what you get after you clean them all up. Bunch of little struts. Took an hour or so. One of them actually broke off and didn't have the fork, so I had to rebuild it with some styrene and strips and a little glue. And then the ascent stage had the top parts put on. So it's starting to look like something. Again, I'm gonna save the little antennas for towards the end, because they're just gonna bust off until I can get it on. And there's those struts on there now, okay. There you go. If you take a look at the leg piece, you know, it's got a little tip here. It's gonna go in the slot at the tip of the lander part. And then you've got these 2 little slabs here that align vertically, and the pieces that it's supposed to fit in have you know, little fork-like arrangements, which you would think would then slide on here thusly. But if you look at the drawings, the CAD drawings you get, they're actually oriented, and these are parallel to the ones at the top. But if you look at the CAD drawings, these are actually oriented this way, which does not fit on there at all. And there's little, I wouldn't even know what to call these, brackets on the bottom, that these would fit in here. And there's no particular, you know, attachment slab, we'll call it whatever you want, for them to go on. So they're going to have to, if you want it to align, they're going to have to go like this. So it's a very odd arrangement where the kit parts do not match the CAD drawings that serve as instructions. So I'm going to have to improvise there somewhat. I decided to make this lovely jig out of foam board and mat board to support and align the leg pieces while I glue them together. I'll take this out of the jig, and there we go. We got one leg on. Not too bad. We'll turn it 90 degrees and do another one. Got a few more on. It's coming along. Well, here it is with the legs on. That worked pretty well. Seems to sit mostly flat. Can't tell. It's paper off here. Yeah, pretty close. I'm gradually going through the various small parts that can be added on at this point without putting tiny things on that are going to break off. So there's this, I'm not sure what this is. I need to find some translations of the diagrams, but that got glued on. These little items got glued on. There's a little vent thingy here I attached. There's a couple other pieces that will I will wait towards the end because this is so fragile. I drilled holes in these antenna mounts and cleaned up some of these parts. For example, here's those little conical antennas, and I put them on a piece of brass rod. Those will need to be painted. You see the legs are on. I think this is a landing radar. There's a pair of these that go on the bottom underneath. And when I cleaned up this landing part, I cleverly shaved all that off because I thought it was an excess piece of you know, the resin cast. So I'll have to add some kind of little bracket in here, probably with a little square piece of styrene, and to attach these. With these, there's little tiny photo etch parts. I believe it's, where are they? These guys here. And I'm sorry, I'm not gonna mess with that. That's too thin. So I got, again, more of my styrene strip and just use that for the little attach posts. So just slowly going through the other little tidbits here on the bottom until I can wrap part of it in foil or not. I'm not really sure if I'm gonna paint that or leave it exposed. I think I might just leave it exposed. We'll see. Getting to the stage where I'm putting the photo etch on the bottom. Again, I may or may not cover it. Anyway, here's a few pieces. I think this is part 9. There's 8 of those on each corner. And I also got these, I think these are like landing radar. I had cut off the part inside, but just replaced it with a block of styrene. And made these little attachment points out of some strip styrene, and I reinforced them a little bit because that, I don't know, it just didn't, it looked too flimsy with photo etch. And then here's more of the photo etch parts being prepared for use. This is just one of those little brushes, and I've got a glob of foil adhesive, and it makes a great pickup tool. I've got some of the photo etch parts put on the side here. There's ones pairs at the corners, and then there's these that go in the middle. But there's tanks in here, and I thought before I put the rest on, I'd check if the tanks fit properly. You notice there's these little round holes here and here, and on this side there's little square pegs, and those correspond to the different tanks. One slightly bigger. The ones for the round holes, of course, like, here we go. This has got a square hole in it, and the other ones have a little round pin, so you know which goes where, and it gives you sort of a locating feature. Problem is the holes aren't big enough for the protrusions or the pins here, so I'm having to shave down the size of these squares, and it would have been a lot easier to do that before I had all this stuff assembled. But and then I think what I'm going to do is I'm probably going to paint most of this lower end and just leave it painted, but I'm going to put blankets on the tanks. So that means I can't glue the tanks on now, but I'll temporarily stick them on there so that when I put these photo etch pieces, there's enough space. So that's the approach I'm going to be taking in this area moving forward. I was able to use some blue tack to hold the 2 tanks in. There's a piece of PE that'll go in the middle, and one on either side, and this gives me an idea on where I should put it on the outside here to give enough clearance to get these tanks in. And then you got to scratch a little wire, or they suggest fishing line, to support the top and bottom, but at least they'd be secured by these points that go into the body. Just had to kind of make sure they fit, and this gives me some idea how to approach that. Oh, the other thing, there is a top and bottom. If you look at these holes in here, they're not exactly in the center. I don't know if you can see that, but they're slightly below the center line. And that means they are going to be, there's an up and a down to them, those tanks, so you got to be careful. They're aligned with the angle of the landing stage structure.